Hi guys, Olive here today to review The Story of More, How We Got to Climate Change and Where We Go From Here by Hope Jahren. This book was published by Vintage Books in 2020, and the paperback, this is a paperback original, comes in at 224 pages. Hope Jahren is an American-born geobiologist who currently works at the University of Oslo. She is also the author of the extremely popular memoir Lab Girl that was released in 2016. I read that book a couple of years back, and I now consider it to be one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books. This book does have a different focus and feel than Lab Girl, but science is still very much at the core of this book. This is a book all about climate change, and it's not just another call to action, but rather it's a dissection of how we found ourselves in the place where we currently are. It's really easy to make a blanket statement that human actions have caused and continue to cause climate change, but those types of conversations normally exclude specific details. How precisely did it happen? Well, it's complicated. Because it's not just any one thing that humans are doing, it's a combination of things that are making things so severe. And as I'm sure you'll know, if you've ever been in a situation that's just snowballing out of control, it's really hard to take a step back and identify the exact moment where things started to get out of hand. But that's exactly what Hope Jahren attempts to do in this book. She uses her own birth year, 1969, as a baseline, and then takes us through the changes that the human world and the natural world have undergone in the time since she was born. Our world today looks a whole lot different than the world in 1969, and as the subtitle of this book suggests, it's Hope Jaren's stance that we now face the risk of climate change in our lifetime because of our relentless pursuit of more. Humans want to consume more of basically everything. In this book, Hope Jahren attempts to show us how much more we are consuming now than we did back in 1969. So there are chapters on food production, both agriculture and the meat industry. She talks about how much garbage and waste humans produce, how much energy we consume. Producing more of these things to satisfy the demands of more people with bigger and bigger desires has a downside. The Earth is paying a larger and larger cost. The author also outlines the way the planet has responded to the increasing demands placed upon it, and she also gives us an idea of what is projected to happen, what will happen when the Earth continues to warm, and who will end up paying the highest price. Now, just because this book isn't a memoir doesn't mean that Jahren doesn't include a personal element to it, because she definitely does. And if you've read Lab Girl, you'll know that she really excels at telling her own story and also conveying the emotion and meaning behind what she's sharing with you. I really did like the inclusion of those elements, and not just because they reminded me of Lab Girl, which is one of my favorite books, but because I think it's necessary for us to feel personally connected to this issue, and I think it's great that it starts with the author. This issue should feel personal to all of us because it is personal to all of us. This is the planet on which we live. We only get one, and our choices today will not just have an impact on our great-great-great-grandchildren, but our children. The issue is knocking at our door. We need to answer it. I think reading this book is a good step in helping make this issue as much of a personal issue as it is for all of us, because you can feel in this book how personal it is to the author, and you can feel a real connection with her in the book. You can really understand where she's coming from. When you read this book, you feel that personal connection to the author, and you start to feel that personal responsibility yourself. Many works discussing climate change have this "we're all screwed" kind of tone to them, and while I wouldn't necessarily say that this book's tone is hopeful, it very much feels like she's saying to her reader, I don't know if we can turn this around at this point, but we could at least try. I think the combination of the fact that she excels at making this issue feel personal and that her tone isn't pessimistic while she's being realistic about the problem, by the end of the book makes the reader feel willing and able to help with the problem. And it really sets up the end of the book nicely, where she provides suggestions of how you can keep the planet in mind as you're making choices of how to consume. She turns the chapters she presented to you earlier into small-scale actionable items, and she very much presents you with a plan of attack. First, make these small changes, and then you can start start making bigger changes that will have a bigger impact. I know this issue can feel so huge and so overwhelming. You don't even know where to start, and it feels like any small changes you do make don't even make a dent in the problem. But the fact is that we all can be contributing to the solution rather than the problem, and it has to start somewhere, preferably somewhere small, and this book gives you a starting point. This book has certainly made me look at things very differently, starting with the consumption in our household, in our day-to-day life. I'm looking at things that we're using and thinking, do we need to use so much of this? Could we use less? Could we go without this altogether? Even starting to question those things is a very important first step. But of course, it also matters that you take the next step and start to institute some of those changes. And as the author says in the book, consuming less doesn't necessarily mean we're downgrading in any kind of a way. She makes a really good point in the book to say that in our world today, we're not all necessarily happier because we consume more. In fact, consuming more tends to just make people want more. It might be worth all of our time to reread Walden by Henry David Thoreau and learn to live more simply. This book is on the shorter side, but it really packs a punch. It is beautifully written. It's written by Hope Jahren, and she's amazing. It has lots of good information that will stay with you, and it gives you as the reader an idea of things you can do to play your part. I loved this book. I highly recommend it. So those were my thoughts on Hope Jaren's latest release. If you've read this book or if you want to read this book, I would love to hear from you in the comment section below. But if you'd prefer to connect with me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.